The celebration in the streets had ended hours earlier, yet Saul still heard it. The rhythm of tambourines no longer echoed against the palace walls, and the women who had sung had long since returned to their homes, but the structure of their song lingered in his thoughts with uncomfortable clarity. It was not the melody that unsettled him. It was the comparison. The numbers had arranged themselves in a way that refused to dissolve, as though the praise offered to him had quietly divided and chosen a second resting place. Saul had worn the crown long enough to understand that admiration can shift without warning. A king does not fear battle as much as he fears narrative. Battles end. Narratives endure. When people begin placing two names side by side, even in celebration, something subtle has already begun to move beneath the surface of the kingdom. David did nothing to encourage it. That was part of what troubled Saul. The young man did not posture or position himself. He went where he was sent. He returned with victory. He spoke with restraint. The commanders respected him not because he demanded it, but because he earned it in the field. Even Jonathan, Saul's own son, had bound himself to David with a loyalty that felt instinctive rather than calculated. Saul watched this pattern form and tried to determine whether it was temporary enthusiasm or the beginning of something more durable. He began measuring outcomes privately. If David remained merely a commander, his victories would strengthen the throne. If David became something else in the minds of the people, the throne would not weaken immediately, but it would begin to share space. That possibility unsettled Saul more than open rebellion ever could. Rebellion can be crushed. Popular affection cannot be ordered away. When Saul summoned David and spoke of his elder daughter, the offer was framed with the dignity of royal custom. The elder daughter would be given first. This aligned with expectation and would raise no suspicion. The condition that followed appeared honorable on its face. David would continue to fight the Lord's battles. Valor would confirm worthiness. The arrangement sounded like reward shaped by tradition. Yet Saul's thoughts moved in a narrower direction than his words suggested. If David were exposed repeatedly to the Philistine front, the risk would increase naturally. Saul would not need to stain his own hand. War could accomplish what envy dared not declare openly. The brilliance of the structure lay in its plausibility. No one questions a bride price that demands courage in a warrior culture. No one suspects malice in a king who encourages valor. David responded with humility that was not theatrical. He genuinely questioned whether his father's house carried the stature required for such an alliance. Saul observed him carefully in that moment. There was no grasping in David's tone, no eagerness that could be twisted into ambition. That made the strategy more complex. A man who reaches too quickly can be discredited. A man who does not reach must be managed differently. Time moved forward, and the court adjusted to the assumption that the marriage would proceed. Expectations formed quietly. Then, at the moment when Merab should have been given to David, she was given instead to Adriel the Maholathite. The record provides no explanation for the reversal. It does not describe a dispute or an apology. It simply notes the outcome and moves on. The absence of explanation creates its own tension, something altered between promise and fulfillment. Whether Saul reconsidered, recalculated, or delayed for reasons unrecorded, the effect was unmistakable. A public arrangement dissolved without commentary. David did not protest. He did not appeal to honor or request clarification. His silence in that moment revealed as much discipline as his victories in battle. He absorbed the change and continued serving. If Saul expected visible disappointment or resentment, he did not receive it. David's restraint left no foothold for accusation. The king was left alone with his own calculations. When word reached Saul that Michal loved David, the development introduced a new variable. Affection changes proximity. A man bound by love will draw closer than a man bound by reward alone. Saul considered what that might mean. If David were drawn into the family through genuine attachment, he would become less distant and therefore more accessible. Accessibility presents opportunity. Saul's mind did not rest on romance. It rested on positioning. This time, the text reveals the intention more plainly. Saul resolved that she would become a snare. The bride price was named with deliberate weight. 100 Philistines would secure the alliance. On the surface, the demand preserved honor and tradition. Beneath it lay exposure, and exposure carried risk that could not be managed from within palace walls. Whether Saul imagined the likely outcome is not recorded. It is difficult to believe he did not. A campaign of that scale required proximity to danger that few survive repeatedly. If David fell, Saul would grieve publicly and remain untouched privately. If David succeeded, the marriage would bind him closer to the throne where further control could be exercised. David did not respond with hesitation. He gathered his men and moved decisively. In the field, calculations change. Strategy narrows to survival and execution. David advanced with a clarity that did not mirror Saul's complexity. Where Saul layered intention upon intention, David focused on the task before him. He returned not merely with the required count, but with double the number demanded, collapsing any illusion that the condition had been beyond him. When the evidence was presented, the court witnessed something more than compliance. They witnessed miscalculation. Saul's requirement had not eliminated the threat. It had strengthened the reputation he feared. The king had no choice but to fulfill his word. Michal was given to David, and the bond was sealed. What Saul gained through proximity was not control, but intensified awareness. He observed David's continued success and could not escape the growing realization that the Lord's favor rested upon him. That recognition disturbed him more deeply than public praise. A king can compete with men. Competing with divine favor unsettles the soul. The next time David played before him, the spear in Saul's hand carried more than impulse. It carried the accumulation of failed strategies. The marriage had not secured containment. The battlefield had not secured elimination. The silence of David had not provided accusation. What remained was a narrowing sense of urgency that expressed itself in sudden violence. The spear left his hand, but the decision behind it had formed long before the throw. David moved, and the weapon struck the wall with a force that echoed through stone. In that instant, the disguise of strategy fell away. What had been structured as reward, framed as honor, and disguised as custom, now revealed its true trajectory. Saul had crossed from calculation into open hostility. David did not challenge him. He did not argue. He withdrew, because survival sometimes requires departure rather than explanation. Yet Saul's unrest did not subside with the missed strike. Fear, once expressed, rarely retreats. It seeks completion. That night, Saul sent messengers to David's house, instructing them to watch and to kill him in the morning. The order no longer hid behind ceremony. It was direct. Elimination had replaced exposure as the chosen method. Michal understood the shift before dawn approached. The father who had offered her as alliance now positioned her within a design that threatened her husband's life. Her loyalty divided. She chose to act. She warned David plainly that remaining would mean death. There was no time for prolonged discussion, no space for debate. She lowered him through a window into the darkness below, creating distance between him and the authority that had once summoned him with favor. The act was quiet, but its meaning was not. The marriage intended as snare had become the channel of escape. The proximity Saul engineered became the reason David survived. When the messengers discovered the deception, the pattern had solidified. The reward had not secured loyalty. The condition had not secured removal. The spear had not secured silence. What remained was pursuit. The text concludes that Saul was even more afraid of David and became his enemy continually. Continually suggests something settled, something no longer impulsive. Fear had shaped policy. Suspicion had hardened into identity. David left the palace not as rival seeking the throne, but as a man fleeing the consequences of another's insecurity. The dangerous reward had exposed more than David's resilience. It had exposed the king's unraveling. What began with a song had progressed through custom, through reversal, through calculated bride price, through doubled proof, through marriage, through a spear, and into exile. Saul had tried to manage fear through structure. Each structure collapsed under its own intention. The trap did not close around David. It revealed the fracture within the one who set it.